Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Adrian Wootton, Chief Executive of the British Film Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to Fueling Growth, the evolution of supply and demand in the film and television production industries. I'm really delighted to introduce our fantastic trio of panelists for today. Janet Graham Borba, who's the Executive Vice President of HBO, our Sustainability Consultant, Louise Marie Smith, and Rob Page, the Commercial Director at Manchester's Space Studios. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore developments in the UK film and HETV production sector, including a focus on the growing importance of sustainability and social responsibility in content creation. You don't need me to tell you that 2020 was a year like no other, but despite the impacts of COVID and a global suspension in production, inward investment spend in 2020 in the UK from major international productions reached no less than 2.34 billion, highlighting the ongoing strength and creativity of the UK screen industries. The BFI and key industry representatives joined forces led by the British Film Commission to develop the British Film Working Safely During COVID-19 in Film and High-End Television Drama Production Guidance, which was published at the start of June. And as a result of this guidance and other initiatives, such as the Production Indemnity Scheme and various other things supported by government, paused productions are now back up and running safely. And actually, as we were talking to the panelists before we came on air, we're all agreeing that the demand for content has never become greater, with people consuming incredibly larger and larger increasing amounts of content on streaming platforms, and the rate of subscriptions continuing to rise significantly. Rather than halt this demand for content, the pandemic has actually accelerated it, which in turn is driving the need for greater skills development and additional studio space. Indeed, streamers and studios and broadcasters are increasing the levels of investment planned in the UK significantly and committing to longer-term leases on existing studio space, such as Netflix at Chairperson, Disney at Pinewood. Further studio developments are in the pipeline, including Sky Studios Elstree and Barking and Brook Studios in London, with expansions planned throughout the UK's nations and regions, including the Bottle Yard Studios in Bristol, Great Point, Seren Studios in Wales, Belfast Harbour Studios, and of course, Space Studios in Manchester. And we'll be hearing from Rob shortly about the work that he and his team have been doing. And there are others in the pipeline as well. And the BFC received an enhanced £4.8 million budget over the next 3 years to help expand work promoting the UK as a destination of choice for studio space investment. So in that context, I've no doubt at all that despite all the trials and tribulations that we've been through, the future is bright for our industry. But I also know we must seize these opportunities and consider how we fuel this growth in a sustainable way. And so I'm going to kick off and I'm going to interview each of our panelists consecutively and get them to talk about the work they're doing in the UK, what they see as the prospects. And I'm going to start with our very special guest from HBO, Janet Graham Borba, who, as I said, is the Executive Vice President of HBO and HBO Max Production. She has a wealth of experience in this area and focuses on all the key production requirements, stage, space, crew, etc. So it's great that we have you here because of your work supervising production on all HBO and HBO Max programming. So I want to kick off, Janet, apart from welcoming you and saying thank you very much for joining us. Is you and HBO have actually had now quite a long-term history in the UK, and it seems to me that you're all very much about leaving a legacy wherever you kind of base the productions. I mean, this would certainly apply to Northern Ireland. I mean, most people are familiar with that incredible success story of Game of Thrones and things in Wales, such as Gangs of London, His Dark Materials, the South East, such as The Nevers and Avenue 5. And can you tell us more about the importance you have of locating productions and the kind of roots, leaving long-term roots in those different areas that you work in?
Well, that kind of legacy, and hello, by the way, thank you for the introduction. It's really nice to see you and to be part of this panel. So thank you for asking me. The legacy question, I think, springs from sort of a happy outcome of an excellent partnership or a series of excellent partnerships on the shows we do with you and with maybe more local partners and so on. For Game of Thrones in in Belfast, we had extraordinary support from Northern Ireland Screen, and then from the high-end television tax incentive. And then we had just a spectacular crew and a great storytelling experience. So there's a nice sort of DNA at HBO about when I was a child, we used to say, leave your campsite better than you found it. And so there's always that nice chance to say, well, as we are working here, let's engage with the community. Let's improve the facilities. Let's partner with those that are working on the show, and try to leave the campsite better than we found it. And beyond that, it's again, it's the happy outcome of a good storytelling experience in all the places that you mentioned. I'm not quite sure that answers your question,
No,
but I hope.
and I'm aware of the close working relationship you've had, not just with us, but yes, with our wonderful colleagues at Northern Ireland Screen and other parts of Wales, etc., Scottish, Welsh government. But in terms of the actual location, sort of following up, I mean, you've made a conscious decision you haven't just focused on London and the Southeast, you have shot in across the UK. And how conscious a policy is that of HBO's? Is it just because it was best for the individual productions, or does it also relate to your co-production partners as well?
It's all of those things. You sort of start, or at least we like to start from, where does a story best want to be told? So that's the kind of grounding of it. But that where the story best wants to be told can be a product of things the story needs, things our partners need. We work a lot with Bad Wolf in Cardiff, for example, and where does our talent need to be? So it's a mixture of all of those kinds of things. Um, and yes, it's done consciously, but not in a conscious attempt, for example, to diversify locations in the UK,
Right.
but in a kind of openness to what a good experience we've had in so many different parts of the UK. Um, so I'm not sure again if that exactly answers the
No, no,
question, but I hope.
no, nobody does. But I mean, the interesting thing is that combining those two questions almost together is that because you have had those close partners on the ground, that sort of stimulated you to leave that legacy. And I know that the training programs you've worked on with Northern Ireland Screen, the crew base of Northern Ireland has expanded exponentially, and you were, in a sense, the leaders in that with Northern Ireland Screen. Before HBO, there wasn't anything really, and now there's an enormous amount going on because of the groundwork that you did. And I just sort of following on from that. You obviously, as a corporation, as a company, have community social relation priorities. What are they for HBO Max now in terms of going forward with your productions, and how do you think those priorities have changed in recent years?
Well, I definitely think there's a wonderful social consciousness to the fact that every time you set up a production anywhere, you are setting up something that has a whole bunch of different businesses embedded in it. And all of those businesses have an impact on the community. So we've had uh, a lot of success making a priority, and I'm very interested to hear Louise talk about this a little bit later in the panel. But in sustainable production, if you're going to set up a business that is a catering business and a transport business and a construction business and all these different things, there are so many ways that we can lighten our touch on the planet. And but they have to be done consciously, and they have to be done throughout the production, and they have to be a priority. And then there's also trying to build, and in building, diversify the workforce that comes into a show. We've had spectacular help and cooperation and candidates brought to us over the years with Screen Skills, and they have a new program that I'm sure you're aware of, where there are 20, I think, trainees starting on a variety of Warner Media, HBO, Warner Brothers, HBO Max shows this fall. But we've had trainees come from Screen Skills over the last few years on, I think, almost maybe everything that we've worked on in the UK. And that's been a wonderful kind of way of building the workforce and trying to diversify the workforce as well. So those I think would be big priorities. And then sort of there's the ability to give back to a community. To, some of it is linked to sustainability. The ability to donate extra food to people that may need it in the community, to use recycled or recyclable materials to kind of set a tone and kind of, I know that I am much better now at composting and recycling and thinking about these things because I walk onto production sets that have made it a priority and made it a visible priority. I like to think that kind of everything in life is contagious. This is maybe a bad metaphor in the time of a pandemic, but you want to expose yourself to things you want to catch, and sustainability is something you really want to catch. So that's been a priority for us as well.
That's very helpful and illuminating. Thank you for that, Jen. And in terms of, you mentioned the pandemic, we can't not mention the pandemic. I talked at the top of the introduction about the guidance that we did and are constantly updating. But I guess the question is, how has COVID impacted your approach at all in terms of what you're doing, where you're doing production, including in the UK, beyond just the safety protocols that you have to adopt? Has it changed your approach to how and where you're making productions?
It hasn't changed the where of it, luckily, other than at the sort of at the margins on our slate. There are a few places that we've had a couple of things that were meant to shoot in places that you simply can't travel to now, or there's a specific thing. But in general, no, we are now, we've stood back up everything that stood down, bar one show, and that has that location challenge. Everything else is either back up and running and then some. So we are busier now than we were before the beginning of the pandemic, but it's colored everything. It's not only that there are protocols to observe, it's that those protocols are complex to observe. They take more space, more physical space. They mean the work takes more time because people can't work close to one another the way we're all used to working. They're much more expensive, as I'm sure everyone on this call is aware. And they're challenging and stressful. One is always trying to have a safe and contented workplace, but when you have a virus out there that's a true threat to your workers, and some of your workforce, your actors particularly, have to work unmasked. It's stressful for those that are trying to provide that safe workplace. So it's changed all of those things, and it's also kind of it's hard not to be. You can't focus on everything all at once, and so it was very hard in the beginning. Not impossible, but it was sort of a layer of difficulty added to. You're trying to make a spectacular show with all of the complexity of that. You're trying to make a spectacular show in a sustainable way, and you're trying to make a spectacular show in a sustainable way and diversify your workforce while keeping everyone safe in a pandemic. It did feel a little bit like, all right, everyone, stand up again. There are a lot of challenges in front of us. But I don't know anyone better to do that than a UK production crew who are inventive thinkers, tireless craftspeople. Anyway, we've done it really well.
And it's very kind of you to give that continued endorsement to our incredibly talented crew. My last question for now is actually about studio space. I mean, HBO have worked in a variety of studio spaces, but you actually have also developed your own kind of stage build space for the Nevers. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that process, what happened, and what ambitions might you have for the space going forward?
Great. Well, thank you for all of your help in helping that come to pass. We talked a little bit before we all got sort of on air here about the challenges of finding stage space worldwide, but particularly in the UK, where there's so many things that draw us to work there. Caliber of the crew, the very competitive tax incentives, the variety of locations, all the things that would pull us to work there. But stage space is at a premium. It's fully booked. It's fully booked for many years going forward. We have the good luck to be a sister division of Warner Brothers, and so we have a couple of shows placed at Leavesden very successfully. That's a wonderful facility. We're happy to be there. They are at, I don't know, 112% occupancy or something right now. It's very busy. And not every show is right for there, but anyway, everything's busy, everything's full. So the Titan facility that we use for the Nevers in Ealing is an old in an industrial park, as you well know, in Park Royal, and is about 300,000 square feet with two big kind of open spaces that make good sound stages, and the rest of it has been good office space and good workshop space and so on. The Nevers is there. Long may it be. I love that show so much. I think it's got just a fantastic energy and lots of storytelling to come there. But we have a relatively long-term lease. I think it's about 5 years. And when the Nevers is finished, if it's finished before then, we would put another show there or sublet it to others to do so. It particularly in with a feature film, it's maybe less important, but for high-end television or a multi-part, an episodic show, everyone is doing everything at the same time. So you are prepping an episode while you are shooting another episode, while you are doing post-production on something else. So the ability to have a large facility where everyone can be steps away from all of those functions means that a director can step away from the set while a lighting setup is being changed, step into the cutting room on an episode that she or he directed some weeks ago to look at a piece of a cut or a visual effect, and then walk into wardrobe to approve something that's in prep, and then get back before the lighting setup's changed. So the ability to put everybody all in one big facility like that leads to a kind of an efficiency that you can't even quantify. It just makes better work. And having to kind of repurpose something that was intended for another use, but which has all the things you need, relative quiet and high ceilings, and is fantastic. So it was a real find, and we appreciate very much your help in making it come to pass.
Well, it was a pleasure to support the efforts of HBO, and it's fantastic about that it's worked out so successfully. And I think my contribution was signing a few letters of support, but I'm very pleased that we were able to assist. And for now, Janet, I'll stop and I'll move on to our second guest, but we'll come back to you again at the end of this discussion. So thank you very much for now, and I'm going to carry on with the conversations about space and studios. It follows on very logically from what Janet was just saying about the Nevers space, and bring in Rob Page from Space Studios, who has been, I think, being incredibly successful in terms of, again, helping to build on the UK's infrastructure and looking at further studio developments in the pipeline. So it's really great to have Rob on, because also I think it's very important from a BFC point of view. We are looking at the UK as a whole, and the UK as a whole really has the opportunity to benefit from this enormous demand in production. So it's not just London and the South East, it very much is over the whole of our islands and nations and regions. And Rob's facility is absolutely living proof of that, and the success and what can be done there, and obviously in this instance in Manchester. So Rob, welcome, and can you tell us a bit about what you're seeing in terms of the sort of scale of demand you're seeing in Manchester for production, and what you're doing about it?
Hi, Adrian. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, well, Space Studios Manchester was established in 2014. We are a 17-acre purpose-built facility for high-end TV, film and production, commercial productions. We currently have 85,000 square feet of studio space spread across 6 stages, including a standalone 30,000 square foot stage. And then in addition to that, we also have a further 45,000 square feet of tenanted business units, which are supply chain businesses to the screen sector, which contains everything from a makeup school called Aquarosa to larger scale tenants of the likes of Panavision and Provision. We've been home to everybody from Peaky Blinders to Cold Feet to Devs to Intergalactic, which is currently airing on Sky. And then our expansion plans are in the design and planning phase at the moment. And we are going to be constructing a further two 20,000 square foot stage spaces with associated workshop and production office space. We hope to commence construction of that at the end of this year with a view to it being occupied in Q2 of 2023. In terms of kind of scale of demand, it's pretty unprecedented here in Manchester. I don't think we're unique in that respect. In the UK, I think if you talk to any other stage space provider, they would say very similar things, that demand is outstripping supply. We definitely had our best year ever, pre-COVID in terms of our occupancy rates that we'd achieved. And if we'd actually have had the other two stages available that we're planning as part of our expansion plans, we could have comfortably filled those during that year as well. And I think if you look at the Lambert Smith Hampton work that they've done in terms of estimating that the UK would need a further 1.6 to 1.9 million square feet of space in the next 15 years to meet current and future demand. I mean, definitely what we see on the ground and experience here in Manchester would support expansion of that scale.
And in terms of that, can I also confirm, because this is something I know that Janet talked about, demand in the UK being like everywhere else in the world, but on steroids. Would you concur that obviously now as production's resumed, would you say that demand level is pretty much back up to what it was before the pandemic started?
Yeah, absolutely, very much so. We've got pencils already extending into 2022, even in early 2023. So yeah, we would definitely concur that we're very much business back to normal, and those high occupancy rates that we were achieving pre-COVID, we're definitely starting to achieve those again now as well.
Well, that's very exciting, and but obviously, and Janet's already made the point about how one of the key drivers, apart from the tax credits, apart from the fantastic facilities, is the skill and talent of the crew, people in front and behind the camera. And obviously, any expansion of any studio space in the UK creates an additional demand for skilled and talented people, because the more stages you built, the more people you need to work on them. It's a very clear law of physics in that sense. I'm just wondering, how are you engaged in that talent skills development? Again, Janet talked about working with screen skills, but I just wondered, particularly in that regional context of Manchester, how are you engaged in addressing the skills demands as well?
Well, we've always had, an established crew base here in Manchester. Going back to the days of Old Granada Studios. Media City was created in 2007, which has the biggest cluster of screen sector jobs outside of London. And of course, we're home to the longest running soap in the world with Corrie. So we've got a really well-established, experienced crew-based, not just in Manchester, but across the whole Northwest. So crew come from Merseyside, West Yorkshire, Cheshire, Greater Manchester, Lancashire, all to work at Space Studios Manchester. So we're building on really solid foundations there, but we're acutely aware that our success as a stage space operator is very much dependent on us having an experienced local crew. So obviously we work with the likes of Screen Skills and also Creative England on all the great work that they do to support growth and skills in the nations and regions. And then locally within Manchester, we also fund and engaged with a social enterprise called Sharp Futures. And Sharp Futures bring in a diverse group of young people into the creative, digital, and screen sectors. And they've had great success in finding employment for disadvantaged young people. So some of our stage managers, for instance, at Space Studios Manchester, have come through that social enterprise route. Runners that they've placed with productions that have shot at space have gone on to find long-term employment opportunities with those productions, but also with the likes of BBC and ITV, and then some of our larger tenants like Panavision.
So in that context, Rob, I mean, my question was going to be, how will the studio's expansion have an impact on the local community? What you're saying is you already have significant roots in the local community, so that you're impacting on the local community now in terms of creating new opportunities, new jobs for young people, and that will obviously continue as you expand the studios.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're owned and operated by Manchester City Council, which is fairly unique from a publicly sector backed stage space. To be the operator and the asset owner is fairly unique. Each year at the moment with our present stage provision, we generate about £30 million worth of GVA in the local Greater Manchester economy through the economic activity that takes place on the site. We believe that with the expansion of a further 2 stages, that would add about another £12 million worth of GVA per year to the local economy. And then in addition to that, we're actually part of a much wider piece of regeneration of East Manchester, which is where the studio is based. So, 5 minutes from, I'm at Space today, 5 minutes from here is the Etihad Stadium, which is where Manchester City are obviously call home. But that original stadium was actually built for the 2002 Commonwealth Games, which Manchester hosted, which was part of a regeneration piece. And arguably, if you kind of look at the whole of East Manchester, it's pretty unrecognisable today to what it was 20 years ago. And the creation of Space Studios Manchester has arguably formed, a part of that regeneration piece.
Well, that's terrific. I'm sure we'll come back to you about that, but I'm going to move on because I'm just conscious of time. So thank you for now, Rob. And I'm going to bring Louise Smith in now, who's been working on sustainability. She's the director of Neptune Environmental Solutions, but she's been working on environmental sustainability issues and problem solving. Well, I think for 17 years, Louise, you've been doing this.
I know, it makes me feel old when I say it like that.
So, implementing environmental management systems within a range of industries. But now, for most of the last decade, pretty much focused exclusively on film and television, I think, for the last 7 years. So,
Yep.
Sustainability, I mean, Janet touched on it. We were touching on it in terms of studios. Janet more than touched on it in terms of its importance. There seems to be a real kind of critical, momentum in the same way as people are talking about diversity and inclusion of our workforce. But in terms of environmental sustainability, again, there seems to be a real step change. And I just wondered, have you seen that tangibly start to accelerate? And do you feel that there is a step change in the way in which industry is approaching sustainability in recent times, in recent years?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as we've been speaking earlier about, since everybody kind of returned to work post the shutdown, even more so. I mean, I think it was building to a critical mass anyway over the past, I guess, couple of years prior to the shutdown. And there was some concern on my part that this could have been something that sort of railroaded the sustainability agendas. Studios had so much else to think about, and this huge thing to work around and to factor into their budgets, and it could have been pushed aside. And I'm very happy to say that quite the reverse has happened, actually. I think almost that time to stop and think that everybody had was used wisely, and people and studios and streamers have come back and said, actually, you know what, we're kind of almost blank slate a little bit here. So we do have additional things to be concerned with as far as COVID protocols go and how that impacts the budget. But we're going to restart, and why don't we do this properly? The demand for my services, not only how many productions actually now want to hire a sustainability officer, manager, or whatever the various studios and streamers title it, but also what they're attempting to achieve, I think has really stepped up. So yes, good news from my perspective for sure.
Well, that's positive. It's certainly going to mean you're going to, you're going to get more and more work. People want, those solutions. But obviously we've touched on, and we'll come back to, I'm sure, to Rob on this, but there is an awful lot of work going on now in terms of stage space. Obviously, as I said, the British Film Commission is heavily involved in this. From your interaction with us in Film London that there is, and people are planning either expansion, new builds, conversions of existing industrial warehousing. There's a whole variety of different solutions to the stage space issue, and I'm just wondering, we are obviously seeing that there's conversations about building sustainability, or building sustainably rather. What do you think the kind of impact this could have on both productions and the environment if the studios are looking at construction, etc., through the prism of sustainability?
I think it's enormous. I think it's the biggest thing we can do for productions, because every production arrives as essentially just a group of people that are pulled together in a script, and they hire almost everything, the space, the kit. And so if we can build sustainability into our infrastructure across the UK, so that when you arrive at any studio space, the electricity supply is 100% renewable, that there's enough capacity there to be able to run your stages without bringing diesel generators in, that there's enough capacity for EV charging, so that if you want to electrify your fleet, there's somewhere to charge it at your studio. If we can build that in and make it easier for productions to turn up and have that just be embedded in the way that you shoot in the UK, because they can't alter those things for themselves. We've spoken about the long-term deals that Disney's got at Pinewood, Netflix have at Shepperton. They, I'm sure now, are leveraging those long-term relationships to try and push those studios to become more sustainable. But there are other smaller productions that do just come in and out, and they don't have any influence over that. So I think it's kind of on us to provide them with that infrastructure, and just take the burden off the production, so that they can then focus on the next things down the line, and put their energies towards that.
Well, in terms of next things down the line, just to touch on that for a moment, I'm aware of a lot of talk about innovation. The film and television industry is constantly innovating. We're talking enormously about virtual production, for example, at the moment. But I just wondered, in terms of the sustainability space, are you seeing a lot of innovation coming in that's applicable to the film and television industry? And if you are, what give us some sense, give us a flavour of what those innovations might be that might become available to the film and TV industry.
Again, I mean, as you said, we are an innovative industry. We are problem solvers. And that's where we thrive, I think, as an industry. So there are a few things. The portable electric batteries is something that we're increasingly beginning to use, which kind of can replace the need when we are on location for diesel generators. The capacity of those is growing. The number that are available is growing. I think LED lighting now, any lighting rental place you go to is going to have a very high percentage of low energy lighting available to hire, electrified vehicle fleets, solar trailers, and then also again, coming back to the infrastructure piece of it, the grid project that Film London are running, that I'm also slightly involved in kind of helping them out, as you'll know, Adrian.
I do.
And that is to solve the problem, again, of diesel generators for the heavily used unit bases in central London, to install electrical cabinets run completely on 100% renewable electricity, so that when your unit base does pull in, you just plug into that. There's no sound, there's no emissions, no pollution. They have been scaled based on an industry advisory group, so we know it's enough to handle the power requirements of a large unit base. And there we go. We can take away diesel generators at the unit bases in town. So that again is something that productions can't solve that entirely on their own. The technologies just don't exist yet, and they might never do. And so it's again something that from the other side we can put in place. And it's that whole old adage of, if we build it, they will come and they will plug in and they will use it.
Well, that's very positive to hear. But and I'm aware of time, and I want to bring us back to a general conversation. But I've got two other quick things to ask you about. Well, they're quick, but they're big. Innovation. A lot of people, when they talk about sustainability, innovation, people say, we can't afford it, or isn't it going to make it more expensive? Isn't green energy more expensive than regular old carbon, fuel, fossil fuel energy? I mean, what do you say about that in terms of is it going to make a significant additional? I mean, we know, for example, that COVID-19 protocols, as Janet has said, made a significant additional cost difference because they had to do things differently and it required more kit, more time. Do you think the innovations that you're talking about, some of those innovations will add cost, or do you think ultimately they'll save money as well as saving the environment?
Yeah, this is a conversation I've had with many a producer. And yes, so essentially the trick is to play it all the way through to the end and look at it holistically. So a newer technology, the rental on a newer technology is likely to cost more per week. But if you look at the full picture, whether that be an electric vehicle, a volt stack, LED lighting, if they use 80% less fuel, which you also pay for, overall, you're probably going to save money. So don't just look at the cost of the hire of that newer technology. Look at the savings you're going to get in the fuel. So it saves you CO2, and that, of course, from my perspective, is the main driver. But actually, you're more than likely to save money. So we do need to kind of look at every aspect of this and not just shy away from that potentially higher cost of rental for new technology and newer kit.
That's very helpful. So I'm seeing questions in chat, and we're going to go to the collective questions in 1 second. But my last, well, actually, I might ask this to everybody, but in terms of those initiatives and innovations, my last question to you, Louise, before we go to the group chat is if there was one single thing, one new initiative into a new studio build or refurbishment, or if you could introduce one single thing that would make a huge difference if productions and studios embraced it, what would it be?
Electrify everything. Just get the capacity. So your electricity tariff, but build the capacity so that Sparks don't need to bring a generator in to light the stage. I think that's a huge one that we still need to work on. And I guess one that we haven't really even begun to start on. We've got a lot of older facilities that are either heated by gas or very, very old, inefficient electric heaters on the wall. And that's one that I think we're at the beginning of that challenge. But I think the big thing now is to electrify and to increase capacity, because there are a lot of places where the stages are so large that although their tariff has been switched to a renewable one, they just don't have the capacity to run the stages from. So we're still bringing diesel generators in. So again, back to infrastructure, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Louise. And I'm going to now come back to us as a quartet so that I can bring everyone in and welcome back to Janet and Rob to rejoin us. Actually, we have a couple of questions already in chat, and actually one question is for Janet, it is a question that sort of plays back to some of the things you've already talked about and Louise was talking about in terms of social responsibility and sustainability from major companies such as yourself, and how do you think that'll sort of develop, Janet, in future years? Do you think it's going to become a bigger and bigger part of your considerations? And if it is, do you have any kind of, not necessarily targets, but what do you think success looks like from an HBO perspective as you incorporate more of this social responsibility and sustainability into the work you do?
This last year has taught me nothing more profoundly than the impossibility of predicting the future. But that said, I think what it looks like for us is this is going to sound sort of trite, but it looks better, a reduced carbon footprint. We're looking on the nevers, which we were talking about not so long ago. We're hoping to work towards a hybrid grid there that, as Louise was saying, not only means we're burning clean fuel there, or clean electricity there, but we're reducing what we would buy in terms of fuel by, I don't know, something crazy like 800 liters a week or something. Like it's a lot of reduction in fuel. So I think what that social responsibility looks like to me is a reduced carbon footprint, a deeper connection to community, a more diverse workforce, a higher, again, I don't want to sound trite, but a sort of a more elevated conversation about all of those issues, about how we all behave as citizens together. That's what I'm working toward.
And that sounds very positive. I mean, Rob, from the point of view, because Louise has been talking quite a lot about stage space, and you've been very positive. You talked very articulately about the links you have into the local community and the work that you're doing to build the local workforce and the sort of social responsibilities. In terms of sustainability, is that a big factor when you are looking at your expansion and how you can be more sustainable in the new stages you create?
Yeah, very, very much so. Being part of Manchester City Council, obviously they have specific climate change objectives that we would have to meet in terms of our expansion plans. But I just think that actually the whole conversation has changed since we built the other stages. That green and sustainability agenda is so much at the forefront now of production's minds. Rewind in 2014. Nobody would have asked us, for instance, how much of our electricity is renewable, whereas that's a fairly, standard and frequently asked question now. So much so from that perspective, we're actually proposing to retrofit a lot of our existing stage space with solar PV, so that in the summer months, even in rainy Manchester, we would be pretty self-sufficient from an energy perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm aware I've got, my clock is telling me I have no less than 90 seconds left. So I'm going to have to bring this to a close. And I just want to thank the panelists, because I'm getting a real sense of change, of evolution, of development, of positive progress around sustainability, about growth, about demand for our industries. And I'd really like to thank Janet, Rob and Louise really, really sincerely from a BFC point of view and from this conference's point of view for sharing their insights. I think it's such an incredibly important time to be part of the UK screen industry. We're creating world-class content with fantastic partners while consumption and demand grows. And it's really encouraging to hear about the positive impact our industry is having on local communities and the innovations in the pipeline to help us grow greener. So I believe, despite the challenging circumstances, we're confident that our screen industry is going to be a beacon of light for recovery and growth. And I think we're going to create thousands more jobs, billions of pounds worth more revenue for the whole of the UK. And it will be because of the efforts of people like Janet and Rob and Louise and all the fantastic colleagues that they work with around the whole of the UK and internationally. So thank you all very much for your support, your partnership, your work, and sharing with us today. Thank you.